Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Stories That Inspire Us / the author series. I'm so excited to be here today with my guest. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series, and we're just going to hop right on into it. As people know, I am also simulcasting right now live through the Wisdom audio app, so welcome to my listeners who are currently on. Oh my gosh, let me tell you about today's guest. She is not only a spiritual teacher, a life coach, comedian, and musician. She is the author of 3 amazing books: Extraordinary Abundance, Outside of the Box Love Experiments, and of course, the Self-Compassion Project. I am so excited to welcome Rita Desnoyers-Garcia. Welcome to the Stories podcast.
Thank you so much, Janice. It's great to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Now, that's quite a combination: spiritual teacher, life coach, comedian, and musician.
Yeah.
Tell us what you did before that. Let's get started there.
Before I did all of those things, or before I was a toddler, Janice? I was just a toddler sitting in the mud playing with sticks.
And that's a comedian for you. There we go.
Yeah.
It's about the details, right? So,
yeah.
But you were in a different field. You have about a 30-year background in psychology.
Yeah. So I went to Holy Cross College in Worcester, Mass, got a BA in psychology, and I did a year in University of Durham University in England, and studied music there. So I almost had a minor in music. I don't think it technically qualifies, but I did a lot of music. And then I did what a lot of Holy Cross students do, is I joined this Catholic organization called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is like the Peace Corps. It's domestic, and it's basically like a Catholic bent on it. So I went to Dallas, Texas, because I wanted to check out the South. I'd never seen the South before. And I worked with refugees. I was a refugee resettlement caseworker at Catholic Charities in Dallas, Texas in the 80s. So depending on, one of the things I learned about refugees is that it all depends on US politics, what constitutes a refugee and what doesn't constitute a refugee. I mean, there's obviously other things that qualify you to be a refugee, but if you're an adversary, then you're more likely to be a refugee than if we're not an adversary, right? So anyway, at those times, I worked with refugees from Poland, Romania, Iran, Laos, Cambodia, Ethiopia, where else? Nicaragua. So there was a variety of different countries, and we were young 20-somethings volunteers, and we would literally pick them up at the airport, bring them to an apartment, make sure they had their supplies, and each supplies were based on what their culture was. And then we'd get them jobs, we'd get their kids in school, make sure all their paperwork is all set. And it was a great job for a young person, because you're running around all the time. And I learned so much about the world, our position in the world, how refugees will do almost anything to get here, because they know once they're here, they can really build a life. And that different cultures have different ways of integrating people. Like it was fascinating on so many levels. I learned a lot about the world by doing that job. And then after that, I worked for the Jesuit Volunteer Corps for another 2 years, settling volunteers in the area. So I was in the South of the United States for a long time. Then I went home, and it was a recession, and the only job I could get was a bank teller. So as a bank teller, this is sort of my suburban adventure. So I was in the suburbs, living with my parents, a bank teller in a mini branch, in a supermarket, in a mini mall. So it was kind of a suburban hell for me. I was not happy being there. Not a lot going on, but I got to know all the gossip in the produce department, let me tell you.
I can imagine.
And I learned that I didn't necessarily want to stay in banking, so I applied to graduate school, and I got into Columbia University. So I went into Columbia for social work. So I was in New York City, which is an incredible place to do social work. There was no lack of problems in New York City that a social worker would not be able to get involved. And I worked with the formerly homeless mentally ill. That was my first internship, just thrown in there. And that was a fascinating job. I learned so much about mental illness, homelessness, SRO, home, housing, psychiatric stuff. Fascinating job. They were really great about letting students really get involved with clients with a lot of guidance. And then after that, my other internship was with municipal workers of New York City in their counseling center. So it was helping all sorts of, workers in the city get benefits, emergency money, counseling. So that was another big, aha, wow, there's a lot of need out there. Even if you're working, there's a lot of need, right? Then after social work school, I got a job from one of my former classmates' moms was a psychologist, and she worked for an agency in Brooklyn that was all about infant child services for developmentally delayed or children with disabilities from 0 to 3. So I worked in a poor section of Brooklyn where I was at Kings County Hospital, which is, if anyone knows Brooklyn, that's you see everything there. It's the big, it's a poor area of town, gunshot wounds, stabbing, the whole thing. So I was working with people who just normally in their everyday lives were in crisis, and then they had a baby that was either premature, had a disability. So it was just all these families that really needed help, and then this is the next thing that's happening to them. So I got to see, families in crisis and teenage mothers and women who wanted babies their whole life and then had a baby that was really premature, had a problem. So that was another great education. And then from there, I worked for the city of New York as an official, actually providing approving services for those kids. So it's kind of on the other side of the fence. And that was fascinating to see how city stuff works, the city system and the good side of it and the not so efficient side. And then finally, I got a job with this nonprofit agency up in East Harlem. So that's an area that is poor immigrant area, a lot of projects up there. And there were nuns basically that ran this agency, and their whole mission was families. They were just all about families. So I got to work with families from, most of them were undocumented people who were trying to make it. And I helped them, have counseling and have support. And we had a community garden and summer trips and things like that. So I learned so much from the nuns, from the community. And then from there, I started having children, moved to the burbs. And I didn't really have any job except raising my 3 kids, which is a huge job, by the way. And sure. I was kind of bored, in quotes. I was busy, but I wasn't doing anything that was just for me. And so I started my own business where I was calling people and selling health and wellness products, right? And that's where everything went off the rails. I was just so overloaded. We had a meeting at one point where the head of the people who were helping me basically said, if you don't start closing clients, I'm taking your leads away from you. And I just muted the phone. It was like a group call. I muted the phone and I just started crying. I was just
gosh,
yeah, I was just I'm trying so hard. I want to save that was the thing. I was going to save my family. I was going to make myself a millionaire, retire my husband, be the hero of the family. And what I was really doing was wearing myself down, not paying attention to my kids, doing a job that I wasn't especially good at, pretending I liked it, and making myself miserable, really. So at that point, I did a lot of crying, and I noticed my kids were doing crying too, because they weren't, being tended to. But I was still hung up on this idea, if only I could get my business going, I could do this. And I found a coach, and I thought maybe he can help me. He can help me close people, then I could be the millionaire. And so we had this phone call, this initial phone call, and he said, Rita, just right now, just take a moment. Can you be kind and gentle with yourself? And it stopped me in my tracks. And one part of me went, what? Like, that's not productive. What are you talking about? Right. And then the other side said, okay, Rita, you're the good student. Just follow his lead. Just do it. Check it out. And I did it. And for a good old minute, I was not a terrible person anymore. I was not a bad mom. I was not a failure as a businesswoman. I wasn't a terrible neighbor or wife or whatever. I was just being kind and gentle with myself. And Janice, I'm sure you've had this moment, but you have these moments in your life where you know this is important, pay attention. This could be a game changer for you. This is a turning point. That was one of those moments. And of course, once again, I started crying and just sobbing, just like that relief that comes when you are in that space of, oh, thank God. I can do this. I can stop beating myself up. I get a break. I really didn't give myself that much because in my head, for whatever reason, I thought when things aren't going well, you just work harder, Rita. You just work harder, right? And you figure it out. And this was sort of a very different road. It was, why don't you take a break and just stop punishing yourself, stop beating yourself up. And then if you need to take action, you will. And so in that moment, I was very curious about what else he had to offer. I'm like, look, dude, you made me cry. I got to work with you now. So I worked with that coach for 4 years. And the first couple of months, I was crying pretty much every phone call. Most of the phone call, I would cry. And then after a while, I started feeling so much better. I learned how to meditate. I learned that I need to take care of myself, go to the gym, get away from my kids a little bit. I ended up hiring an au pair, which is, I don't know if you know this, but an au pair is someone from usually another country, young woman usually, comes and lives with you at a reduced cost, and you give them room and board, and they get a stipend, and they basically take care of your kids for a period of time. And there's programs that do this. And we had a lovely, lovely woman from El Salvador who was so over the top nice and generous. And she actually humbled me because she would show me the agenda that I would give her, for my schedule. I'm like, I just want you to know what my schedule is. And she goes, there's no lunch break on here. When are you having lunch? And I was like, oh my gosh, I never put lunch in. So it occurred to me that maybe, I was getting winks, from the universe that maybe it's time to go to the next level of self-care, like giving yourself breaks. You don't have to be doing all the time. You can have some space in your schedule. It doesn't mean you're slacking off. It doesn't mean that you're lazy. It just means that there's always going to be that list of things to do. But the most important thing is how you do them, what state of consciousness you're in. That dictates the quality of the work, how effective you are, what's really important, So I was getting all these lessons, right, in the first 6 months to a year of this coaching. And I noticed that I felt so much better. And then I started noticing everyone around me who was a mom they were like the Walking Dead, just like not happy, walking around with their stroller or their baby Bjorn, but not a lot of positive affect on their face. Maybe they had like a latte or whatever. They're fueled by the lattes, just looked exhausted. And it wasn't a lack of money or resources. It was all internal. It was all conditioning. And so I reached out to a couple of my friends and I said, guys, I've changed significantly. I've been doing meditation. I've been learning a lot of stuff. Are any of you interested in getting together and just exploring this more? And 3 people raised their hands, and that was my first group. And we had that group for 2 years, met in my living room every week. And we would just talk about what was going on with us. And I would write guided meditations, which is where the guided meditation CD came from. And that was the first group. And then I started seeing people individually. And because I had that social work background, I said to my coach, should I be taking like a coaching class? And he's like, you got it, kid. You're good. Don't worry about it. And so I started coaching people individually, and then getting into things like abundance, because that was a real not for me, didn't really feel abundant, And so I decided I'm really going to dive into this. And then I made it a subject of this mini book that I made. And by the time I explored it, I felt so much more abundant. Like I kind of wrote my way out of the problem kind of thing, and realized that for me, the place that I want to feel internally is the space of abundance, regardless of how much money is in existence before me. And I realized that I'm completely surrounded by it when I allow myself to see it. So, that book had a lot of exercises you can do, but really it's this place of we are abundance. We are all the things we're searching for, like a dog chasing its tail, and never quite gets it. It's like, no, the tail's part of you, dude. You don't have to keep chasing it. Just be it. And so as I started understanding more of these concepts and integrating them, then I decided, I think it's time to teach about compassion, because it's something that I keep going back to with my clients. I keep going back to, hey, can you be kind and gentle with yourself? Hey, can you be kind and gentle with yourself right now? And, someone has said, you should really teach a course on this. That was sort of how I was running a lot of my business, was like someone would say, hey, can you do a workshop on this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I did a course on compassion. It was called the Compassion Course. And it went really well. And so someone said, you should really write a book about this, so that it's not just this 6-week course or 8-week course, but something we can take with us. And so then I started writing down, kind of condensing what I was teaching into book form, which is kind of like making a cookbook, because you need to test out the recipes a little bit. So I had a lot of readers use my workbook to make sure it translated from me speaking and talking and interacting with people to the actual book itself. And they had a lot of suggestions. And one of them was like, Rita, you're funny. You need more humor in your book. It doesn't sound quite like you. You need some jokes in there. So my editor and I, who's also a very funny person, just went through it, and we just was like, joke. We just threw a bunch of jokes in there. And it really made a difference, because one of the things that I think women do, men do this too, but we take ourselves so seriously. We take life so seriously. And what we forget is that, I kind of see myself and especially other moms is like, we're just Lucy Ricardo. We're just trying to like get it through the day, and we're goofing, we're doing all these goofy things sometimes. And I have this image of like this real classic scene of Lucy and Ethel in the chocolate factory, and
great episode.
Right. And the factory is just the candies are coming out, and they're supposed to put them in boxes, and the assembly line is getting faster and they can't keep up. And so they're doing what any mom would do. They start putting it down their shirt. They start swallowing them. They're throwing them back. They don't know what to do. And I'm like, that is sometimes the day you have. That's just life. Sometimes it's like the assembly line is really going too fast, and all you can do is try to cover your tracks. And we can look at Lucy and Ethel do that and we can laugh. But when we have a day like that, we are so hard on ourselves. We're so condemning. And so I'm like, hey guys, we're just kind of Lucy here and Ethel. We're just trying to, sometimes it's going to be, I don't know if I can swear on your program, but
no, go ahead. It's okay.
Sometimes it's a shit show, man. It's just, and that's okay. And we can laugh at it and cry and get all the attention out, and then go, okay, so what's next? How do we want to do this? What do you need? And what's next? And so the compassion book, the self-compassion book, is really just, it's a permission slip to go and start writing down what the heck is going on in your life, and really looking at it and having deep, deep compassion, and maybe even a sense of humor, like a really compassionate person would do. Like, all those scenes in the movie where there's the little kid and then there's the compassionate adult, and they're sitting on the curb and the kid's really distraught about something. And the parents go, tell me about that. Oh my gosh, that sounds really hard. I'm so sorry you're suffering with that. You know, hey, what do you need right now? You need a hug, whatever you need. And then there's usually like some kind of like little lightness at the end, like, hey, let's go get an ice cream, or you're doing kid, or whatever it is. So that's what I wanted this book to be. A little bit of like, hey, it's safe here. We're going to joke about some things. We're going to take some things very seriously. And it's a safe place for you to explore all these different aspects of yourself, especially the parts that you hide away and you don't want to talk about, and you're pressing down like a beach ball under the water. And it's coming up and it's making a lot of splashes. It's time to look at that with a deep sense of self-love, acceptance, and compassion.
And Rita, I just want to back up a tad, because so many golden nuggets in what you were describing, how you were describing your journey. And I think what's really important to note, like, you took that opportunity. You weren't just hearing what our parent said about you have no lunch.
Right.
And you thought about, you paused for a moment and you're like, I'm not allowing myself to take lunch. Like, why am I doing that? But when you started working with your coach, and I love the fact that, you're so very honest and raw and very authentic on how you describe that, was in that moment when your coach said, be kind and gentle to yourself.
Yeah.
You no longer felt like you were that terrible person.
Yep.
And that just must have been such a weight off your shoulders.
Oh, huge relief. I mean, my body just was like, sob, ugly cry on that one. Yeah. My whole body was just like, I'm not a terrible person, because my whole life was about, I'm just not enough. I got to keep earning it. I got to make myself worthy. Work, do. And that had a lot of rewards, and I got really far with it, but it was a survival strategy that no longer was fit. It has limits to it.
And the survival aspect of that, I think, of course, too, and you're the expert on this, being women, being the caregiver of others, taking care of everyone. Sometimes we don't pause for reflection to have that self-compassion for ourselves. And what I love about your book, and on the front of the book, it says, and I love this, how to become emotionally stronger, more effective, and happier by giving yourself a break. And you did just that, not just as the professional, but you were internalizing and bringing it forward and saying, hey, I've been through this myself. Like, you were practicing what you were preaching in that moment. And I just have so much respect for how you went about doing this book. I just think it's beautifully written. And I also want obviously, to talk about your book some more. I love how, first of all, you set the book up.
Okay, great.
It is like a workbook, but it's absolutely beautiful. And I wish that our listeners could see this, but it's actually so very beautifully written. And like, you also describe how the book works. And a lot of workbooks or things that we come across don't have that in it. And I thought, wow, this is like, I love this, how this book's work. This book has 3 sections: self-compassion, acceptance, and integration. Now, when I think of self-compassion, I don't think of all those things together. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just kind of sitting here, and I'm like, wow, I never thought of it in that terms. Yes, we should have self-compassion for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that transcends into being much happier, being more vibrant, not only with ourselves, but with others around us. What was one thing when you were writing this book, and you had mentioned that your editor or your friend, said, hey, we got to put some, comic relief in there. What do you think is your big takeaway from doing the Self-Compassion Project book? What is your big takeaway from it?
That's a good question. One of the things that I take away is not just to have compassion for yourself, but doing things collaboratively and with support makes a huge difference. This book didn't happen by itself. Maybe I birthed it, but my editor was my labor nurse. The cover design lady was, dabbing my brow, someone else with the doula. So the readers were like the doulas, helping me out. So collaboration was really key to this. And also, part of the reason I wrote this book was to keep myself honest, I have to say, because there are still times where I'm not completely compassionate with myself, so it's sort of like, hey, there have been times where my friend said, hey, why don't you just read your book? Why don't you just go read your book? Don't you write about this? Someone really wise said it's really important to be self-compassionate. I'm like, oh yeah, it's me. Yeah, right. So it's not a one and done thing. This is a process that takes time, and maybe I'll never be completely self-compassionate, but I tell you, I'm a lot more than I was. So I'm giving myself a pat on the back for that. So I would say that, and the other thing is, one of the ways this came about was because my editor, who was also helping me with marketing, was doing a rebrand with me. And she had this chart where, you go through your brand promises and your mission and all this stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about with your,
Yes.
Right? So she was talking about, like, I think it was either brand promises or mission, and there were 3 of them. And we were talking about it, and I was just like, self-compassion, acceptance, integration. And that's where those 3 sections came from. And I went, whoa, I just kind of stopped and I went, oh my gosh, I think that's how I'm going to organize this book, and this course. So it's sort of like when you have no idea how you're going to feel after you do something. Like I was doing this rebrand because that's what people in business are supposed to do. It's sort of like, oh, I guess I need a haircut. And then you realize how much better you feel after that haircut. Like you're just like, oh my God, my life has changed completely. I am a different person because I have bangs or whatever it is, right? So I'm not comparing getting a haircut to rebranding, but it's just like you go in thinking, yeah, I'm just getting a haircut, or I'm just gonna like do this marketing stuff. And you come out going, oh, that's the next thing I'm doing. This is the next big thing. And this is really important to get out to these women, because most people are in non-acceptance most of the time, 23 out of the 24 hours in their day. Most people are not very integrated in their life. They have concepts, but they don't actually put them into practice or live them. And I know most women are not very compassionate with themselves. So it's a long answer for your question, but,
Okay.
but, those things really help solidify the book, and the idea that, because I like workbooks, right? I wanted this to be something you could cuddle with a cup of tea in your bed on a rainy Sunday and just start writing in it and just go, okay, this is the place I need to be right now to be with myself. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yes, it did. And yet, what I further love about that, though, what you said is that I think in many terms, we do, figuratively and, business wise go through a rebranding. And I really consider myself to always be a work in progress. Obviously, the business side of things, I just went through a huge rebranding. And it was a lot of work. It still is, but I'm comfortable with the fact that I did it. I don't know how to describe it other than I knew it was going to be hard. And when we work on ourselves, we know it's going to be hard. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not going to be pretty. And I
Yeah.
think we give ourselves that grace and dignity, like, okay, you can do this, have some compassion for yourself.
Right.
That goes a long way for sure.
Yeah. And for me, the compassion was, you want lasting change in your life, you need to keep coming back to compassion. Because like you said, you're going to go through things that are difficult, or you think you can't do, or you start to get down on yourself, or you wonder why it's not working the way you want, or you feel like you're going backwards. Those are all just indicators that compassion needs to happen, that it's time to have a little self-compassion, because that really helps you just move forward and expand,
Yeah. And be open to that expansion.
Yes.
Because when when we had our little pre-podcast chat, Stories That Inspire Us is my third podcast, and there were some naysayers out there, and I'm okay with that because they took the time to say, do you really think this is a good idea? But I knew in my heart and soul it was what I wanted to do, and to kind of be that platform for others, but also it was very therapeutic for me, with everything that transpired with my son. But I also took a step back and realized that in doing that, Stories That Inspire Us is really my self-compassion project.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love the fact that it will always, self-compassion, without a doubt, I think will always, as you said, be a work in progress. And I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
I just don't want to ever be in a position where I might say, oh, well, you're not having a good day. Oh, well, identify where you are.
Yeah.
Acknowledge, give yourself that grace, and then, have that compassion, and, sharing what you're passionate about is so very valid, and it feels good. And oh my gosh, I could put a lot of adjectives in that for sure.
Yeah.
And, as you go through the book, and as you have said, there are different places, of course, where, you can write your thoughts down.
Yeah.
And again, to me, it's a very welcoming workbook. It's not like, oh my God, here's a workbook. It's like, it's very calming. It's very reassuring. You talk about so many wonderful things in here, my gosh. How long, by the way, did it take you to write the self-compassion project?
It's deceptively little time, because I had already written the course. So it took me, I decided that I was going to break it up, do 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That was my formula. And some people say there's no way you can write a book 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. But what I decided was that it was 20 minutes minimum. So I knew I could do 20 minutes a day. Sometimes it was just 20 minutes. Sometimes it was longer if I was on a roll and I had the time. And I just put it in my schedule. And then it took me about 3 weeks to get the first draft done. And then of course, another several months for the readers to read it all and to lay it out a little bit, and then do, many edits. So I would say 4, 5, 6 months maybe before it was ready to be printed. And the woman who did the cover design and the interior, oh my gosh, like, yes, judge a book by its cover. There's a part of me
Oh
that's
my
like,
God, absolutely.
please judge a book by its cover, because it's amazing cover. I love the cover. I love the internal. I had an idea of what I wanted, and she just really did such a great job, such great work. So it really helped encapsulate what I wanted the reader to experience.
And it is an experience. And it's really a beautiful experience. And
Thank you.
you're so welcome. I want to go back to a little something you just said, because it made
Yeah.
me think of something that you were chatting about at the beginning of the podcast. 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. You knew you could definitely get 20 minutes in, sometimes more. And you said I put it in my schedule.
Of course. Yeah.
So if it's that important to you, you will put it in your schedule.
Yeah, look, I still write out a schedule. I like having the paper schedule.
Me
I'm
too.
like I still like cash checks at a bank with a teller. I'm like your old aunt, whatever. But I always put everything that's important in my schedule. I've just been like that, I think, since I was a very young kid, and I missed a test, and that was enough for me, I know, but I work with a lot of clients who really resist that. And I'm like, look, if you don't put it in your schedule, then you're carrying it around in your head. And guess what? It becomes a worry, and it becomes an obsession. And then sometimes you forget it, and then you beat yourself up. Why not set it up so that you're supporting yourself in what you want to do and not sabotaging yourself? And so now most of my clients, like, I put it in schedule, I'm like, good
I love that.
job. But it really, I put all of my exercising, I put in my meditation, I put all my clients, obviously, any appointment I have, that I need to get groceries. There are some things I don't put in the schedule, like folding clothes, that isn't necessarily in the schedule. But anything that's got a time limit, or I really want to make sure that I do, I put in that schedule.
I love that. And I think there's more memory solidification, pen to paper.
Yeah.
It helps us put those important things down, but keeps us accountable to ourselves.
Yes.
So I do have to ask the question, did you pencil in your lunchtime?
Oh, that's a good question. What I do is I don't actually pencil unless I am going to a restaurant, but I always leave 30 minutes to an hour open for lunch, but I don't write lunch down, but maybe I will from now on. But I always, yeah. And I have a lovely lunch in my kitchen pretty much every day. It's great. I really, especially because I do intermittent fasting. So lunch is very important because I haven't eaten anything since the night before. So lunch does not get avoided anymore, for sure.
I am so glad to hear that, because I do see more books, more self-compassion project workbooks, more things coming down the pike for you. Oh my gosh. For our listeners and viewers, of course, I will make sure Rita's information is in the show notes. Do you foresee yourself doing another book like this?
Well, it's funny. I've been in this marketing program, and part of the marketing program is they have a thing where you write your own book. And so you go through their whole process. Is very kind of like, what's it called? Spontaneous writing type thing. And so I actually have a first draft that I completed in 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But you're doing 9 hours a day of writing, it's like intense. Of something that I'm working on it has exercises in it. It's kind of like a workbook. It's kind of like a memoir. And it's about up-leveling your consciousness, up-leveling your energy. And it has self-compassion in it, but it's sort of like kind of my story of how I was very much in this kind of lower state of consciousness most of my life, and how I was able to raise it up.
Wow.
To a higher state. So you're in the state most of the time of, I call it from misery to miracles type thing. So you're in that miracle state of consciousness. I'm not there all the time, but I have tasted the sweet, sweet fruit of miracle consciousness. So how to get in there, how to allow yourself to kind of float up there, or disrobe whatever you need to disrobe, or shed the snake skin to be in that different state. So that's kind of the next project. I don't know if it'll ever be a book, but it's certainly something I'm gleaning a lot of information about.
That is wonderful. And obviously, please keep us updated.
Yes.
With that. Rita, how can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
So if they want to get in contact with me, there's my website, becomingawake.com. There's a contact thing there. And it also has all my programs and events and, everything. And then there's also on Facebook, I have a private Facebook group that's called Calm Mom Alliance. And everyone's welcome to join that. And it's just a place where I ask questions. There's, interesting things to reflect about. I do interviews with people. I have a YouTube channel called Becoming Awake. People can jump in there. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not on Instagram. Like, my presence is there, but I'm not there all the time. I'm more of a Facebook person. And then also, if they want my book, I'm on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Goodreads and all the usual suspects on there.
Oh, that is wonderful. Rita, this has been such an amazing conversation today on your podcast. And I hope that you will definitely consider coming back and sharing more with the author series on what you're up to.
Absolutely, Janice. This was a lot of fun. So
Wonderful.
no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Everyone, I want to thank you all so much for being here today. Stories That Inspire Us / the author series was another way to, obviously I love to read, I love to write, but the reading aspect of it is more of reaching out to those who need, for instance, Rita's book, The Self-Compassion Project, how to become emotionally stronger, more effective, and happier by giving yourself a break. Don't we all just need a break? And I know that the many people that have read her book, you just got to read the reviews. They're amazing. On that note, that if your story needs to be told, that means that somebody is waiting for you to tell it. Go to the Stories That Inspire Us Facebook page, or of course you can reach me online. Reach out and let me know. This is Stories That Inspire Us, again, the author series. Today I was inspired even more so, having an amazing podcast with Rita. Thank you all so much, and don't forget, your story is that important. We'll see you again real soon. Thank you for now.